Hola, hola, mi gente. Welcome to another episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. Today we have Dr. Lauren Guerra. How are you? Do you prefer Lauren? Do you prefer Dr. Guerra? What do you want me to refer to you as?
Lauren is fine. I make my students say Dr. Guerra, so they know, but
That's
but
right.
right? No, but Lauren is great. That's perfect. Thank you, Jessica.
Well, welcome, welcome. I'm actually really excited. Like I said, right before I hit record, you're like, what do we talk about? And I'm like, girl, let's just get into it. We'll
Let's
see
flow.
like how
Yeah.
how it flows, like what we get into. Let me read your bio and then we'll get into the wine and then the chisme.
Perfect.
Dr. Lauren Frances Guerra grew up in the heart of Los Angeles. She is of Guatemalan-Ecuadorian descent and an active member of the Roman Catholic Church. She earned her doctorate in systematic and philosophical theology from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. I'll make sure I say that.
Thanks.
She is currently teaching at the University of California, Los Angeles in the César E. Chávez Department of Chicano Studies and Central American Studies. As a professor, she approaches academia with the complexities of race, class, and gender in mind. Popular religion and community-based art inform her writing. Teaching and research combines all of these things that are most important to her, including faith, culture, and justice. Her research interests include the U.S. Latiné religion, theological aesthetics, and Central American studies. Her long-term goal is to serve as an advocate for the U.S. Latiné community through her work. In addition to teaching, she hosts the Gold Hoops and God podcast, which is available on all major platforms and YouTube, as is ours. So, welcome, really, truly welcome. After that, I always wonder how people feel after like somebody is reading their bio to them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's been like a lot of like reflection, like especially like this last couple years and stuff. Like, man, like where have I been thus far? Where do I want to go from here? Right? Just thinking about the future and stuff. And it's pretty wild. I feel like I've lived many lifetimes. So
Well, girl, that sounds like a perfect place to share the wine.
Oh yes.
Are you drinking wine? And if so, what wine are you drinking on the line?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I love wine. Wine is one of my favorite things, and then coffee is a close second. But I am drinking one of my favorites. It's Line 39. Ta-da! Line
Nice.
39, it's a Pinot Noir from California, 2021.
Love.
Exciting. Yes. What are you having?
This is my last glass. This is actually Vinos Unidos,
Mm,
a Latino-owned winery.
cool.
And it is the uh, Triunfo, and it's a 2022 Tempranillo from St. Helena in Napa
Mm,
Valley.
mm.
And I'm literally having my last glass with you because
Oh,
it's
cool.
good. Yes.
Nice.
So I need to make sure I'm putting this on right where I don't accidentally hit it. So, salud, Laura.
Salud. Yay. Cheers.
Do you prefer
Ding.
Laura or Laura?
Oh, it's funny. So I was very fortunate and I lived in Spain for a few years. And when I lived in Spain, my friends called me Laura. They wouldn't call me Lauren. So that yeah, it's kind of funny that you say that. So yeah, Laura, Lauren, sure.
Yeah.
Either or.
No, I mean, it's so funny because, so many of us, when you grow up here, right?
Yes.
Um, obviously my name is Jessica, but
Hmm.
when I go to Spanish speaking households or when I go to certain areas, it's not, it's just the automatic, oh, hola, sí, ¿cómo estás?
Yes.
But, and then like my dad's name is Javier.
Mm,
So what do people, and it depends on where he is and who he's with. Are people going to
right.
call him? Nobody says Javier, or else I would probably, if I heard that, I'd probably yell at them and punch
Right.
them in the face, right?
Yeah.
But there's a difference between Javier and Javier,
Hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
and I have
Yeah.
a cousin who, when her, and I have other friends. It's their name is Diana. It's not Diana. It's Diana. So it's
Yeah.
always just so interesting. in regards to how people pronounce certain names, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not Adrian, it's Adrian. So
Exactly. Yeah. It makes a difference. It's true.
yeah.
Yeah, the pronunciation is a big deal. Yeah, it's so interesting because I've taught for so many years. Like I've obviously like seen so many, it's kind of funny to say this, but I've seen so many different names and work with so many different people that it really that cultural question comes through as far as like how people like their names pronounced. Or sometimes like, a student will be registered as one name, but they're like, oh, but I go by, right? I go by like Bobby, I go by this, I go by that, right? Instead. Very interesting. Yeah.
I
It's
mean, my
cool.
husband's name is Antonio,
Hmm.
and I don't ever introduce him as Antonio. I always say
Right.
Antonio,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it depends. So I actually stopped like telling, to me, I always tell people, you need to tell people how you want your name pronounced
Yes. Yes. Hmm.
because
Yeah.
and don't let people say I can't say that because
No.
people manage to say all these very complicated like
Right.
European names,
Right.
but yet they can't say an African name, or they can't say a Latino name. Like
Hmm.
you can if
Yeah.
you try,
Right.
but most people are just too lazy to even try.
Exactly. It's about the effort, right? Like making the effort that that intention is to say it correctly and to respect that person. Yeah, it makes all the difference. That's a good point.
So I want to I'm just going to jump into it
Let's
because
go.
you
Yeah.
are, first of all, you teach at what I joke about is like the holy grail for like Latinos to go to college is UCLA.
I mean, yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I
You know
wrong?
what? We are the number one public institution. So, go Bruins. Yeah. It's true. It's true. And I have to say, like, it has been so beautiful to work with Latinx students because in the other places that I've taught, there's some diversity, but because I'm in an ethnic studies department, 80-90% of my students are first generation, second generation, and it's really cool. And I know some of them, I mean, they have told me, they've emailed me, after the class is done, et cetera. They're like, it's so important for us to see a Latina professor, and even more so the fact that I'm Central American, I'm Guatemalan-Ecuadorian. And so for the Central American students, they're like, oh my God, we never see Central Americans,
Yeah.
So it's been cool. It's been I would say like I really feel like every point in the journey it happens for a reason, and I have learned so much about myself, about Central American history, all those things like through teaching. So it's been fun. It's been really cool.
I no, I love that. Like I said, I think every time I see or talk to somebody from UCLA, I'm like, just because growing up, I grew up in San Diego, I'm still, I'm here back here. Um, but even growing up, like that was always what everybody talked about. Where at school do you
Yeah.
want to go? Oh, I want to go to UCLA.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
were like, oh, SDSU or Irvine. Like I was also part of Avid, so we got to
Oh, cool.
go to a
Mhm.
lot of schools and got exposed to that.
Oh, nice.
But growing up, like you actually came to the US, right? Like you were not born here?
I was born here. I was born here in Los Angeles.
Oh, duh, it
Um,
just says that. Oh my gosh, I'm such a dork. Sorry.
that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I was born in Los Angeles. My mom was born in Los Angeles. And so my Guatemalan side, it was my grandparents that immigrated. So my grandfather, he, risked it all, crossed the
Mhm.
border, undocumented, and he established himself and then brought my grandmother and at that time my two aunts, right? So the eldest kids came over.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the family was born here and grew up here. And then on my dad's side, my dad immigrated here when he was about 19 or 20 years old. He met my mom, and then, and the rest is history,
So you're
right?
like first gen on one side,
It's like
second
one and a
gen on
half.
another.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like I'm 1.5 or something.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I get that. I'm
yeah.
I'm second gen. Both my
So cool.
parents were born here.
So cool.
But I understand like so I want to ask a question just being like understanding that,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because I never had to struggle in regards to being a translator for my parents because they were already born here,
Mm.
right? I didn't have that struggle. However,
Hmm.
I am still very about my community. I'm
Yeah.
still very much about uplifting
Totally.
Was that something that you even had to think about or feel like because a lot of my friends were first gen, so sometimes I felt like out of place with
Mm-hmm.
them because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to Mexico to visit family because most of my
Right.
family had already immigrated to the US.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to be a translator. So it was almost like this weird dynamic of not feeling Latina enough
Enough.
growing up, especially because Spanish was
Right.
not my first language. I wondered if that's something that you went through
Right.
as
Right.
well
Right.
growing up.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start with the language question. I am very grateful that I spent a ton of time with my Guatemalan grandparents. So my grandma, she only spoke Spanish, so I learned with her. So really, I I really am bilingual in the truest sense of the word. Like I was learning Spanish and English simultaneously. My elementary school and high school offered Spanish classes, so that really helped as far as like grammar and reading and that kind of thing. Because usually people who learn Spanish at home, they have the verbal communication skills, but they might not have like the writing skills or the translation skills, right? So that's that. And then as far as like helping my parents, because my mom was born here, she really, of course, like between my parents, she really took the lead as far as like documents, filling things out, making calls, calling the doctors, that kind of stuff, whatever. It was really my mom. I mean, I would help a little bit, but honestly, my mom kind of she's pretty much a super lady, superwoman in a lot of ways. And so she took care of a lot of things. Um, yeah, yeah. So I get what you're saying though. I think for me, um, so growing up in Los Angeles, I realize now that the while there are, some Central Americans, there are Guatemalans, El Salvadorians here in LA. I don't know if it's Mexican American and Mexican culture is predominant, right? It is like the main kind of culture that we're exposed to, food wise, et cetera. And so I did feel a little bit disconnected because outside of my family, I'm like, I don't know any other Guatemalans, I don't know any other Ecuadorians. And so that has been interesting to kind of like unpack over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I could see that. And I actually, interestingly enough, I actually do have a couple of friends who live in LA who are Guatemalan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So to me, I guess just because I talk to so many people, I forget
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't forget that California is a predominantly, especially like LA, San
Yeah.
Diego, like it's predominantly a Mexican culture place.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that Latinos are not monolithic. There's so many countries that we come
Yes.
from, there's so many
Exactly.
things. But I think when you do live in a place like this,
Hmm.
it can be easy to forget. But
Hmm.
when we remember, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember. I
Yeah,
got,
yeah,
I got.
yeah. Yeah, it's, that's actually been one of the really cool things about my podcast, Gold Hoops and God, is that by interviewing, I mean, a lot of the people that I've interviewed are my colleagues and friends and things, and I've gotten to learn really cool things about them, things that I didn't know. One of my friends, I didn't know that she came as a 9-year-old undocumented. Like, I was like, whoa, what? Right? Another friend, she is Costa Rican and kind of grew up in Kansas City. That was interesting, right? So things like that. It's like the diversity, in other words, like the
Mhm,
diversity of Latinx people. We come from everywhere, and each of those countries has its own story. Like each of those
right.
countries has a history. Being Cuban is different than being Argentinian, is different than being, from Brazil or, Costa Rica, or wherever, right? And so that also I think is important. Like you said, like we're not just a monolith. We're not just like a melting pot of like one group. So
Mhm.
yeah, yeah.
You talk like very early in your bio, you talk about being an active member of the Roman Catholic Church.
Hmm.
How important was being Catholic? Obviously, being Catholic, being Latino is almost synonymous, but there's a lot of like
Hmm.
diverging things at this
Hmm.
point. It's not just all,
Yeah.
but how did faith kind of from a Catholic viewpoint, because I am not
Hmm.
Catholic, um, how did that help? I don't want to say help or hinder. How
Hmm.
did that shape your viewpoint being Latino,
Oh yeah.
being Catholic, and
Mm-hmm.
what's happening
Mm-hmm.
in the States when you were growing up, because
Yeah.
obviously there was a lot of things in discourse growing up, and even now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and you know, I mean, I'm very grateful that my parents, they encouraged me to have right. They encouraged me to have a relationship with God, have faith, to pray, all those wonderful things. But they never pushed me, right? I never felt like forced or pushed or anything like that. And then I actually went to an all-girls Catholic high school, shout out Immaculate Heart High School, in Los Feliz. And
Is that where Meghan Markle went?
I went to school with Meghan Markle. Yes,
You did?
I did. I used to have lunch with her on occasion. I
Wait, the
have
fact
vivid
is, like,
memories.
that's what popped up in my head. Like, I just
Yes,
was like, wait, that sounds familiar.
she's she I mean, obviously I only know her from way back in the day as a high school student, but I have vivid memories of her. She was such a sweet girl, really cool person. I remember having lunch with her on a handful of occasions, like warming up our food in the microwave together. I mean, it's surreal to see like where her life has gone now, right? Like she's
That's so how do you feel?
like,
Okay, we'll get back to this other stuff, but how does it feel when somebody and you always that you always had a positive experience with,
yeah,
it gets so much hate?
hatred. Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, and that to me, that just goes to show that you cannot believe, right? Like you cannot believe the basically like what the media says, you know, like there's so many, unfortunately, like there's so many smear campaigns. And basically if there's this like sentiment against someone, and I will say I think it's rooted in racism, you know, I think
Oh,
that
for sure.
for Megan, I think that's the issue. I think it's really rooted
Absolutely.
in racism against her because
That
she
just
is.
goes to show, regardless of how, and imagine if she was even darker complected.
Oh
She's a
yeah,
light-skinned black woman,
she is.
right? She's a
She is.
light-skinned black woman. But
Yeah.
imagine if she was had a darker complexion, how much
Oh,
more hateful this
it would
would
be
be.
even
It's
more,
ridiculous.
exactly, there would be even more cruel commentaries. Yeah, and so it just goes to show like what we see in the media, and that can go for, I mean, basically for anyone, right? Any celebrity that we see, it's like we think we know them, but we don't
Mhm,
know them, you know, like
mhm.
we don't know them personally. So um, anyway, but yeah, like my experience of her, she was a super sweet person, very, very kind, always involved in like the theater production. She was a great singer and like just like overall like a sweet kid, you know. Again, this is high school, so but yeah, so I'm circling back to like the faith question. I'm grateful that I had teachers in theology or in religion classes that left space for question, right? Like it's okay to question. It's okay to ask hard questions. It's okay to be upset with some of the, you know,
I
and
was
that's
always
it.
taught God can handle your questions.
There, that's it. Up 1,000%. And it's like, because as you get older and as you start learning, you're like, wait a minute. Like you start learning, like, wait, the church did this, the church did that. Like there's, you know, all of these, alas, right, very disturbing, uncomfortable historic events that have happened, you know, colonization, et cetera, like all this stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I've had the space to ask the questions. And I think one of the reasons why I do still kind of I sort of put that out there is that I want people to see and to know that you can be feminist, you can be progressive, you can be open-minded within, right? Like within the parameters of Catholicism, you know?
Right.
And in other words, like no one's going to tell me that I'm not Catholic anymore, right? Like I'm confirmed, I believe, right? Like no one can tell me otherwise. Um, and so yeah, I mean, I've always been very interested in those kind of like, I don't know, like theological, esoteric, like philosophical questions. I've always been interested in that kind of stuff. And so it made sense that I went and studied theology, that that I did a PhD in theology. kind of
Yeah.
crazy,
No,
but
I mean, I think that's always interesting because I did grow up going to church. I grew up and honestly, I stopped going to church in
yeah,
2016.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
when I used to go to a mega church in Dallas when I lived in Dallas,
Mm-hmm,
and the
mm-hmm.
pastor literally came and told, I mean, without saying his name, right? He's like, "Don't
I know
vote
where
for
this
the
is
person, vote for the
going.
party."
I know where this is
And I was
going.
like, this party does not include me. This party, like, will
Yeah,
do everything to scare, people from communities of color. And this
exactly,
party will, do anything to pin us against one another. And
exactly.
so at that
Yeah,
moment,
yeah,
I'll be very honest with you, I lost faith in the church.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
um
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I haven't
Totally.
lost faith in God, although I know that,
Yeah,
like, and anywhere two people are can be church, right? And
absolutely,
so I
absolutely.
think
That's so
that's,
well said. Yeah,
like, people forget that. I
yeah.
think people forget that there does not, like, in the Bible, it does not say you have to, it says build the church. It doesn't say build
Mm-hmm.
a building. It
Correct.
says build the church.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, like the earliest Christians, they were home. I mean, they were meeting at home. It was like small groups of people meeting at home, talking about God, sharing the stories and things like that. And it's true. I think that's one of the struggles in general that people have is there is so much focus on the church as an institution, right? Roman Catholicism, i.e., the Vatican, i.e., Pope Francis, right? It's like the church, right? It's like, well, you know, and I love Pope Francis. I think he's been one of the better popes that we've had. I feel like he's much more in touch. He's more compassionate in terms of like the disenfranchised and things like that. Anyway, but it's like, okay, there's that. And then it's like it doesn't mean you can't have faith. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, like a person can have their relationship with God and it's okay. It doesn't mean that they have to necessarily be actively involved in a church, right? I feel like the church really the purpose is for community, right? Like that's kind of like why we gather, right?
Mhm.
It's to be with others, to share solidarity, da 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 da. And so yeah, I mean, this is something this is something so crazy, and I think it's so true. A person can go to like 6 different churches or 7 different churches in the city, and they're all different, right? Like
Mhm.
one church is doing like feed the hungry, the other church is telling you, like give us all your money because you have to tithe, right? It's like what every church can kind of give a different message, and so also I think this is where I think also this is where discernment comes in. Like you have to discern, right? Like you have to kind of discern and feel like, okay, like what really feels like authentic, or what's really going on? Is this like a group that's kind of alas, I hate to say, manipulating, right? It's like what's really happening. And so I
Yeah.
think it's tough. It's tough. And it breaks my heart when I see how people do get, let's say what it is. People do get manipulated, they get kind of like sucked in and it becomes, I mean, we see some churches that are very culty, they
Yeah.
become very
Oh,
culty
for
and that's
sure.
scary too. So yeah, it's a thing.
How, like, being at a university, at a public university, no less, right?
Yeah.
I feel you have to, like, I would imagine you have to walk that line
Yeah.
of your faith, and because you teach Chicano studies,
Yeah.
and obviously race, gender, socioeconomic status,
Hmm.
sexual identity, I'm sure comes into all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you, like, again, you know, stay in line with your faith while
Sure.
discussing all of those types of things? Wine break. Time to refill that glass and come back for more wine and chisme.
Totally. So that's actually been one of the coolest things about teaching at UCLA is because whether or not we realize it, religion, faith, etc., is operating quite a lot. In other words, when we're studying, so when I am covering El Salvador and the history of El Salvador, I'm talking about Archbishop Oscar Romero. How could I not, right? Like he was a martyr. He was a priest, he was a martyr. And so it kind of it's kind of amazing because it opens up space to talk, right? And because I approach it from a place of like, hey, we're in a class, you know, no judgment here. What's your perspective, right? And I think it's actually, I think it's been pretty helpful for students because, you know, if they have uh, questions or issues or what, you know, what have you, in terms of religion, they can't, it becomes a little complicated to say that to their family, right? And they're probably not going to go tell that to their pastor or priest, or, you know what I mean? It's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can be sort of, I can sort of be like the ask the expert, right? I can kind of be like, hey, what really? I'm like, give it to me. Like, what's your what are your questions? Like, you know, we think about, so for example, like Adam and Eve, sexuality, da da da, like where does this come from? You know, so we're able to talk about these things in a really cool way. I try to kind of establish from the beginning of the classes, like I want them to feel like it's a safe space. You know, ask away, right? Basically, like ask all the questions you've had and have not been able to ask. And because, you know, we talk about colonization, we talk about the imposition of Iberian Catholicism in the Americas, like that happened, you know, that's real. I can't ignore it, you know,
Yeah.
in my teaching. And then, so for example, even Cesar Chavez, right? He was very devout. He was a very devout Catholic. That's the reason why he had La Virgen de Guadalupe on his banners. You know, again, it's there, right? It's like the religion, the faith and religion questions are front and center. So, you know, as a academic and being thorough in my teaching, I have to like address it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's good. I think slowly but surely ethics studies is kind of opening up a little bit to that question, because before I think it was like case closed. Basically, it's kind of like anti-religion. We don't like religion. Religion is horrible, right? It's like religion is horrible. It's terrible. It ruined everything. Da 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 da. And I'm like, wait a minute. In general, most of the time when people are writing or in ethnic studies, there is a concern for the most marginalized, right? It's kind of like we want to give voice to the people, the indigenous, African diaspora, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. A lot of those people, guess what helps them survive? Their faith.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like when people are
Yeah.
crossing the border and they're carrying rosaries, that's when I got chills. That's powerful. You know what I mean? Like when that's all you're, you know what I'm saying? Like when that's all you're bringing across the border, you have nothing else.
Yeah.
I think that that is so powerful, and that's something that people cling to. And in other words, by not paying attention to faith and religion and spirituality in all its forms, I think it is dismissive. You know, it's kind of dismissing these people as like, oh, like, you know, faith is silly, da da da. It's like, no, like this is really something very powerful and something very sacred for
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
I mean, I think people, you know, call, whether you call it God, whether you
Mm,
call it Muhammad, whether you call it the universe,
that's it. Right. Right.
right?
All
Like
the above.
like
Hmm.
it's no, nobody's here to tell you how to practice your faith, but
Right.
people have faith in something,
Exactly.
right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if your faith is like, I gotta hold this Coca-Cola can just to get, girl, if that's, you know
Hmm.
what, if that's what you gotta do,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I hope it helps you float, whatever you got to do.
Right. Yeah. You know. Yeah.
But I mean, you have faith, and usually people have faith in something. If
Something.
it's in
Hmm. Hmm.
yourself,
Hmm.
like what do you turn to when that faith in yourself, right, goes
Hmm.
away? There's something else you always turn to. So it's
Absolutely.
very, very different. But it's so actually what I was gonna tell you, and my husband, his tia is Helen Chavez. His
Oh,
blood, yeah,
really? Oh
Helen Chavez.
my gosh. Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and my mother-in-law, she is on the board of the Cesar Chavez Foundation and the United Farm Workers.
Wow.
So,
How cool.
yeah,
A small world. That's
so
awesome.
I'm like, I got married into that family. So I've
That's intense.
met
Yeah.
Cesar
Wow.
Chavez's like grandkids and stuff. I've been to their, like, some of the
Wow.
granddaughters.
That's
I've met
intense.
his
That's
son
cool.
Paul.
That's a legacy. I mean, yeah, that's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. So when you say that,
That's
so
dope.
every time I see it, like literally everywhere
Yeah.
around is something Cesar Chavez.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more in our house, but
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
my mother-in-law's house, actually, I was gonna do, and I will do like a reel about it,
That's
right?
so
Like
cool. Yeah.
when you marry into this
Yeah.
family, like
Yeah.
everything starts permeating Cesar Chavez everywhere.
That's so cool. That's amazing. Yeah, I know I mean, like talk about like iconic. Like he really made such a huge impact on the world, you know.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Yeah.
I know. And it's so funny the fact that, I do this, not just this podcast, but that,
Mm,
when I created the directory of the first, of the first directory of Latiné on wine brands,
so
right?
cool. Yeah.
To be able to do that. And my brother-in-law one time was joking. He's like, Cesar, I'm like, no, Cesar would have appreciated that now we own some of these lands. We own these brands.
Yeah. The
And
agriculture.
he was
Yeah.
just saying it just to like try and get under my
Joking.
skin,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, guy, imagine had he been able to see the
Yeah.
evolution. Obviously, it's still
Mhm.
not
We
fully,
need more progress. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, we need more
But
progress, but to see
hmm
like, okay, at one time we were boycotting grapes and we were doing this and doing that.
hmm
And obviously there's also the flip side of what's happening right now,
Oh,
right? Of
yeah.
what's
It's
going
so
on.
it's
Um,
wild. It's so it's like I feel like I'm in like a surreal like a simulation or something. Like
yeah.
what is this life right now? Like, oh my God.
We so
Crazy.
as somebody who went to theological school and as
Mhm.
somebody who is, who teaches what you teach, but also like again, just kind of the symbiotic stuff. Um, there's a lot of people that do use religion, that do use the Bible to negate what actually the Bible says. Like they're
hmm
weaponizing the Bible, right? Like, for
Yep.
example, you
Totally.
have several passages in the Bible saying that you need
Yeah.
to welcome other people, you need to
hmm
welcome the
Welcome
refugees,
a stranger.
welcome this. So
Yeah.
when you see that as somebody who is a devout Catholic, but also somebody who is trying to stand up for your own community,
Yeah.
what are the things that you want to make sure that you let people know in regards to what is being said, what's actually in the Bible versus
Right.
and what's being practiced?
Right. Yeah, it's actually, oh my gosh. This is okay. This is when like I love having conversations with my friends who are like biblical scholars because that's a whole different, that's like a whole different branch of scholarship. Like the, the frustrating thing is that people use scripture against others, right? It's like the cherry picking of certain passages and verses to be homophobic, to be transphobic, to be anti-immigrant, to do all these like very cruel and hateful things. And it's very frustrating because more often than not, those are little phrases and quotes that are taken out of context, right? And that's the problem is like people don't read the scripture. They're not
Yeah,
actually reading the scripture,
right.
and that's another issue too, is that so many times like our knowledge or what we know about, faith, God, etc., it's being filtered, right? In other words, like people show up for mass, for a service, whatever, and they're relying on the pastor, the priest, whoever's up there talking that day to interpret, right? Versus like we actually every human being has, yeah, I'm gonna get a little woo-woo. Each of us is created in the image of God. Like each of us has the skill and the ability to understand the scripture for ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And so that I think that's a big issue is like people are just kind of like taking the filtered version of it without digging deeper.
Yeah.
And
For
it's
example,
super
like even something where in the Bible it does say, and I literally have read this myself even,
yeah.
right? That if there's a pregnant woman and her life is in danger, you always have to choose the life of the mother. But yet they're using it's
This
being weaponized.
legislation, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like you said, like people aren't using it, even within our own communities, right? They're like, oh
Yeah.
no, it shouldn't be, blah, blah, blah. But there's so much that isn't that they is weaponized that actually isn't in scripture.
Yeah,
Even like
exactly.
Godam and Samora and laying with other, like the whole homophobic thing
Yeah.
actually was added in by somebody.
It's totally good.
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah. That is like yeah, it has to do with like hospitality. It's a whole different thing. And also people forget, like, and I say this all the time, the Bible that we know, right? It didn't fall out of the sky.
it
It
was
didn't
written by men. Still, it was written by,
it
thank
didn't fall
you.
it didn't you know
Thank
it didn't
you.
fall it didn't fall out of the sky in English printed for us, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, these were primarily oral tradition, oral stories that were passed down for who knows how long, finally written down. It's honestly, it's a collection, right? It's a
Mhm.
collection of stories, each with their own context, each with their own historical, social, narrative, etc. And then on top of that is translation. Some of the what am I saying? The Hebrew scriptures were written in Hebrew, and then the Evangelion, the New Testament, was written in Greek. And so anyone who speaks many languages knows that translation is tricky, right? A word in one language does not always sit the same way when you translate it,
Even in
right?
Spanish, the
In
same word
English and
can mean
Spanish.
different things in different countries.
There you go. Right. Exactly. And so it's like with all that, it's like, okay, scripture is beautiful. It is beautiful. I feel like it is beautiful because one of the things I realized, I'm like, man, it has everything. Like it has war, it has good leaders, it has, betrayal, it
Romance.
has romance, it's got like family drama, it's got murder, it's got whoa, it's like the most juicy book you could find, right? And so in that sense, it is very powerful and it is very beautiful. But again, I think that people need to sit with it, right? Sit with it, read it, for yourself. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I remember I was quite like traumatized when I heard this, and it's so real, is that during the time of slavery in the US in the South, people would use that I think it was from Paul, I want to say, it's like slaves obey your masters. It's like, oh, okay, right? To what? To
Right.
justify, to say like, oh, see in the scripture it says like slaves obey your masters. Like, no, that's not. I was like, that's not why it's there. It's really frustrating because it can be so, in other words, these things can be so easily misconstrued and
Yeah.
manipulated. And I think I really, in my heart, I feel like that's what's happened, like they say, like in the wrong hands, right? Like in the wrong
Yeah.
hands, and anything at all, like in the wrong hands, it can be really something dangerous. And so, yeah, man, it's hard. It breaks my heart. Because for me, I'm like, faith is about empowering the disenfranchised, like helping your neighbor, it's about love, caring for one another. That's for me, that's what faith is, right?
Right.
But sometimes that's not that's not what comes out. So
Yeah. No, I mean, when you were saying the Bible just didn't fall out of the sky, you go when you go to church, it is like, this is the word of God. This is the word of God. This is the
sure.
word of God. And then
Yeah.
when you start questioning, but wait, God didn't write this. Men wrote this, and
Yeah.
men are not perfect. And why would like a man
Yeah.
not write this to, maybe skew the facts a little bit to make it seem this versus this? And when
Sure.
I
Yeah.
started like having that kind of questioning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, it honestly was, it kind of opened this new door for me or
Sure. Yeah.
whatever, because I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take, because I feel like, especially when you grow up in church, you take the Bible literally.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah,
And
most people
it's not,
do. Like
like you said,
today,
it's a
yeah.
it's a
A lot
collection
of
of
people do.
stories. It's
A lot of people
figuratively,
do.
it's,
Yeah.
like when you're reading a book, the things that you can imagine, you're
Mhm.
that's what
Mhm.
you're doing with the Bible, and what lessons
Yeah.
can be lifted from it. That
Sure.
doesn't mean, like, if we were taking it literally, that means every time a woman was on her cycle, she's gonna go to the roof. be outside. She's not gonna be in
kicked
the house
out.
because she's
Yeah.
unclean, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. No, it's so true. Like, and I'm like, I'm like, people forget Jesus turned water into wine. Jesus, like, he like ran off away from his parents to go to the temple. Jesus talked back. He overturned the tables, right? Like the revolutionary, in other words, like the revolutionary part of Jesus, right? This divine person, um, people forget that. People like to sanitize,
yeah.
who Jesus was a lot. And
Well, just like if he
it's
were to,
crazy.
he wasn't accepted then. If he were to
Oh,
come now, the same people
same
that are
thing.
using his name will be like, "You are not,
You're not
blah
good
blah
enough. Yeah.
blah." Yeah, you like,
Yeah.
and the same with Martin
It's
Luther
wild.
King Jr. Right? Like all these people bring up his name. No, if
Mm-hmm.
he was
Mm-hmm.
still alive, he would not be you would not be his friend.
You would not be happy. No, it's true. I think I want to say like his daughter posted or had like a reflection, right, recently with
Oh yeah, I
Martin
saw
Luther King
that.
Day. And she's like, y'all act like you love my father, but he was arrested. He went through a lot. Like, don't act like you all of you loved him because you did not.
Yeah.
He spoke the truth and people did not like it. So yeah.
So when you think of all of those things, how do you
Mm.
bring that into your Chicano studies class? Because
Oh,
obviously there is
yeah.
a lot, right? And
Yeah.
actually, let me before you get answer that question, let me ask you, what does Chicano mean to you? Because I feel like it means different things to different people. So what does that mean to you?
Right. So Chicano, I mean, yeah, Chicano is a political term, right? It's very much associated with consciousness, right? It has to do with Mexican American experience, consciousness, organizing, that kind of thing. And so I love the work that has been done, right? I'll say it that way. I have like tremendous respect for like the authors, like Gloria Anzaldúa. Um, I'm thinking like who else? Laura Medina, she does more like religion work. But yeah, like all these people who have written about their experiences and things like that. Um, and this is where it's interesting. It's like I love and appreciate all the work that has been done, and yet I do feel like I cannot 100% like lock in because I am not. Does that make sense? I hope that's not too
No, I
like
was about to
controversial. I
honestly,
hope that's not too controversial.
I was about to ask you like
I hope that's not too
how has
controversial.
that feel
Yeah.
not being Mexican American, right?
Right.
Guatemalan and
Yeah.
Ecuadorian.
Yeah.
How does that affect your perspective on, like I said,
Right.
on being on the word Chicano? Because I'm sure,
Yeah.
like I would imagine most of your students are probably Mexican descent or Mexican because if
Yeah,
they,
majority.
yeah,
Yeah, the majority of my students are Mexican American, Chicano. I do have, I do have some Central American students like Guatemalan, El Salvadorian. Occasionally I have students from other countries. Yeah, but right. So it's like I love and have huge respect for all that work that has been done. And it it was a battle. So I've heard. It was a battle for the department to go from Chicanx studies and Central American studies, right? That was a battle,
mhm.
I was not in those rooms, but that's what I've heard, right? It was a battle. Um, and so it's like technically I'm more so under the Central American Studies umbrella because the classes that I teach, like right now, I'm teaching a course on Central American racial construction. So that's kind of those are more so the classes that I teach to
Can
focus on
I
Central
audit your
America.
class online?
I know, right? Oh my gosh, that would be awesome. I'm teaching online right now. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do feel like at the end of the day, it's a shared struggle. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
it's it's a shared struggle. So being from LA, the proximity, right? The proximity to Mexico. Growing up, we used to go to Tijuana all the time. I would say like I bet maybe once or twice a month, we'd drive down to Tijuana. We'd eat I think it was called Puerto Nuevo to get
Oh yeah,
lobster.
yeah.
Like, yeah, you probably
That's what
know.
we used to do all the time.
Yeah. So we do that. My parents, we have a lot of things in our home that
It's
are,
not the same though now. It's like
oh,
before it was just like these little mom and pop shops
yeah,
and you could
so
get
good.
like you could get a lobster, rice, beans, and a beer for like $8-10 a person.
Yeah,
It's
so
not
good.
like that
Not
anymore.
anymore. Oh gosh. I haven't been in so long. Oh man. I haven't been in forever. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking Valle de Guadalupe. That would be
Oh yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Do an adventure over there. Oh my
Yeah, I've done. I've
god.
been there a
Have
few
you gone?
times.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think. Yeah, so like, right. So the proximity to Mexico, and I've spent a little bit of, in addition to that time of going to Tijuana and things like that, I've spent a little bit of time in Cuernavaca. So it was like a summer abroad kind of program in college, and I stayed with a family, and it was so fun. Like it was so amazing. I loved it. It was the best time. And so I feel like it's a shared struggle, it's kind of
Yeah.
like we're all we're all sort of in it in a way, like all of our different, although it's different countries, like there is a shared struggle. There is like I don't know, I feel like a solidarity of like this history of all the things that have happened of trying to like get ahead. I think in general, most migrants, immigrants from from our countries are just like fighting for a better life, literally. Like
Yeah.
they just want to provide more for their family. They want to give their kids opportunities for education that they didn't have. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like it's actually very simple. It's actually very straightforward. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing outlandish. Yeah. I think that is what's fueling it, right? I think that's why like we have so many people who are refugees right now that are just like trying to survive, like literally fighting for their lives. Um, so yeah, I mean it's been very cool. It's been very cool to work in the department. And yeah, I mean we talk about all kinds of things in my class. Like so right now that we're going through so much, like in LA, we just had the recent fires, and
Right.
I always I try to leave space. Um I try to leave space for my students to share. I'm just like I like at the beginning of class, I'm like, how are we doing? Like yeah, how are we feeling? How are we doing? And they'll share, they'll share. They're like, yeah, I'm having a hard time, I'm having a hard day, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. And so yeah, I don't know, like that's kind of just the way that I teach, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
I could never be the professor or the person who just like ignores what's going on in the world, right? I will never forget this was crazy. In college, I remember 9/11, right? Of course. I was a sophomore in
Which is
college.
crazy that there's so many like kids now that obviously weren't
They
born for
weren't even here.
9/11, weren't
I
even
know.
here, or
Crazy.
people who don't believe.
Crazy.
And we're
Yeah.
like, we literally saw it
We
with
saw
our
it
own,
happen.
we
Yeah.
saw it in real time
Yeah.
happening. And
Yeah,
I
but
actually lost a friend and
oh
in the North Tower. So
no.
it,
Oh.
yeah.
It's very, yeah, it was like so horrible and so devastating. But like I remember, so like I remember that happened, and I had a music class. It was for like non-majors, whatever. And this was before, I don't know, this was like before email and like all that kind of stuff was really popular, I guess. So basically, like we had to go to the classroom to see like if we were having class or not, right? And so my roommate and I, we went to the class, and the teacher was like, yeah, we're having class, we have to just like keep moving, da 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 da. And we were horrified. We're like, are you serious? Like, we're gonna act like we didn't just have like a major crisis, like horrible event happen in New York. There was a lot of loss. And this teacher just, this professor, whatever, acted like nothing happened. And from that moment, I was like, oh no, that's not like that will never be me. I kind of made like a commitment. Does that make, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
Like I made a commitment to myself of like, no, I will never be that professor that ignores pain, basically, that ignores tragedy or pain or whatever of what's going on in the world. That's messed up. I like, this lady
Oh
got me
my
messed up.
gosh.
She
Yes.
was like, she got me messed up. I was like, no, this is crazy right now.
And
I
with
was like,
what
this is
you
wild.
teach, I feel like
I
that's the
know. It's
center of everything right now is,
no.
obviously deportations that are
Yes.
happening.
My students are
ICE,
worried.
especially in
Yeah.
ICE rounding up all of these
It's
farm
scary.
workers and
Yes.
or going into school, like they've
Yes.
removed the barrier of not going into schools and
Horrible.
churches. And
Horrible. Yeah.
do you,
It's
what are
scary.
your, like, what are the things that you're hearing from your students in regards to what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of them are very nervous. They're nervous. Hmm, yeah, they're nervous. I mean, because it's a huge Latinx population, we do have students who are undocumented. Their families are undocumented. So, um, yeah, it's a very real, like, it's a pressing threat. It's a pressing uncertainty, as far as like what's going to happen. Um, yeah, yeah, it's very hard. Yeah, yeah. They're. I think a lot of them are still. I think a lot of them are still in disbelief that we have this same person, the same person in power, because we saw what happened. You know what I mean? Like it's like a reliving. Like that's the fear. It's like, are we gonna relive what we had before, and or is it gonna? It's like, are we gonna relive it? Is it gonna be worse? Is it gonna be not as bad? Like what is really gonna happen? So
Yeah.
that's
And
part
the
of it.
crazy thing is so many people from our community voted for him.
I
And
I
you
can't
know how many
understand
times
it.
I would see things
I
and they're
can't
like,
understand
oh,
it.
he says he's only gonna deport the bad ones, not realizing to him,
Everybody
even
is
we're the bad
everybody,
ones.
everybody. It doesn't
We're
matter.
second gen. We were born here. Does not matter. We're the
It
bad
doesn't
ones.
matter. And it's so I'm going to share this here. Why not? So, during his presidency the first time around, I lived in Dallas for less than a year. And
I lived there for 15 years.
really, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Okay, so
I
I
moved
live in,
back in 2017 and won't ever go. I mean, I'll go visit my friends, but I won't ever move back.
yeah, I mean, yeah. I I was supposed to be there for 2 years for a postdoc position. And I was there for less than a year, because I had a very horrible, very traumatic incident with Dallas PD, in February. It must have been February 2017. Um, yeah, and because he announced, his, what was it called? Oh yeah, it was an immigration crackdown. And so they saw me, they're like, she looks brown. And my ID was from California because I'm from California, right?
Right.
And so it was like that was even more of like a red flag, like why does she have a California ID? It was horrible. It was so traumatic to see the prison system from the inside, to
You're
see
covering
how
your
people are,
mic.
oh, sorry, to see the prison system from the inside, to see how people are treated worse than animals, honestly. It was very traumatic. It was like that was one of the most traumatic experiences I've ever had in my life. Um, I think Sandra Bland had been killed like kind of like around that
Mhm.
time. And I remember one of the women in the cell being like, because other women were like getting upset, screaming, da da da, and they
So
were
they
like,
did arrest you?
uh-huh. Yeah.
Wow. I mean,
I
that
was
doesn't
at
shock me. I've had the bad experiences I've had with police have all that were in Texas as well.
hmm
I
hmm
and I and I did not grow up having bad because I grew up where there was a lot of community policing. I
uh
grew up where the police officers were my softball coaches. So
okay.
I didn't grow up with like
A
this,
negative, like,
yeah, a negative
mm,
view of the police because I knew police and they were always at the school for different
that's
things, for
cool.
bike roundups
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
like definitely the worst experiences I've ever had with police were in Dallas. I mean, major.
It was so it was so wild. It was like it was wild. People don't even believe people don't even believe me when I tell the story. But yeah, I remember like, and this is this is where faith comes in. I was like, dear God, please let me get out of here in one piece. I was like, that was my prayer. I was like, let me get out of here in one piece. Because I don't know who's in here, right? Honestly, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's gonna happen. As far as like who is in the cell and also the police, I don't know, right? I don't know. But I remember one of the women, because the other women were like getting upset about this woman. Oh, this was awful. I think she was having like mental health issues. But the way that the police like dragged her, like literally like dragged her across the cement floor, it was like so cruel. And that image will never like leave my mind, like that was like burned in my mind. But of course people were like reacting, being like, leave her alone, da 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 da. And I remember someone saying, hush up, girls. You don't want to end up like Sandra Bland. I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. Like,
Oh
I
my
hope I make it
God.
out alive. Really. I was like, I can't. I was like, I cannot. Dear God, please. Really. Because at that moment, it's like I had nothing. I had no cell phone, no protection. No one was there to protect me except
Yeah.
in my mind, like
How
God,
long were you
literally.
there?
It was one night. It was one night. But like seriously, that was enough. In a way, I
No,
was like, that was enough. It was like
no,
so
I get it. Like I said, I
traumatizing.
think anytime um you have a negative experience, right? You
Yeah.
think of, I think oftentimes I do believe that police are there for a reason and for certain things and whatever. Um, what I do not believe in is the militarization of the police, of what's
Yes.
happening.
And that's
I
what's
don't
happened.
believe in that.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I
Yes.
believe
Mhm.
that there are better ways to
Yeah.
police that, if your first instinct as a police officer is to shoot, you should not be a police officer,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
too many instances of people shooting now, asking questions later.
Correct. Yeah.
So if
Absolutely.
that's your first instinct, you should not be a police officer. If you're
Exactly.
like, I think there needs to be way more mental health checks than there are.
Yes.
There needs to be, I know it's this huge thing. And I have, you know, people that I know or people I've grown up with or friends or
Mm.
whatever that are police officers. But if you also are, um, if you, there's this frowned upon thing, right? Of
Mhm.
telling on your fellow officer.
Oh,
That needs to be done more often, because the other officers are what see
yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead
Not
of it being
hide.
like,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Right.
like, why are
Hmm.
we hiding? You shouldn't
Yeah.
have to hide when,
Yeah.
if somebody's doing, if everybody has this negative view of the police,
Right.
right? And maybe it's 15%.
Hmm.
Why is everybody being held hostage, no pun intended, by that 15%, when maybe 80? I mean, I don't know what those
Yeah.
percentages are, but what we often see that in the media, right,
Hmm.
is all of the bad ones, all of the
Yeah.
bad interactions. All we're
Yeah.
seeing on social media are the bad interactions. We
Mm.
don't see the good interactions. And if there was more acceptance of, hey, you know what, this guy is not doing right, whatever, and actually something happening,
Mm.
and hey, let's get to know our residents, and we're always patrolling this area. Why don't we have, like, a strict, because that's happened before. I know people probably think it's really crazy, but where I
Mm.
grew up, it actually happened, where there was, like, like I said, at the schools, the police were there, like,
Hmm.
getting to know the kids. So if they saw you
Mm.
or something, like, and I'm not saying none of this ever happened, but I just didn't feel the fear of police like I do now.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and like to your point, so speaking of mental health, one of the things that is really tough is that we really don't have a good system. We don't have the resources, infrastructure, what have you, for mental health crises. So, like, I'll share this. I've made ¿cómo se llama? A video on my YouTube about this, so it's like public knowledge, whatever. I was diagnosed with bipolar in during the pandemic. Huh, that was crazy. And
That's
so,
fun.
oh yeah, like the world fell apart and then I fell apart on top of it. But no, that so anyway, but like as I was having like a real like I was really like struggling. And unfortunately, the only option that my parents had at that moment was to call 911, right? There was no other, there's no, in other words, like there's not like a mental health line, or at least they didn't know of one or something, right? And so again, like it's very traumatizing, like, so can you imagine, like I had that very big trauma with the police, and then as I'm having like a mental health crisis, to see like police and paramedics at my parents' house, I was like, whoa, like what is happening? But
Yeah.
that's how it is. That's kind of like that's how it is right now, right? We don't have a good system. There's so many people that struggle with their mental health, they're not getting the support that they need because we don't have it in place. We don't have a system for that. Everything is like policing, when really people need help with they need help with their mental health. They need help with addiction, right? Like be it, alcohol, drug, whatever. Like those are different issues, right? They need people who specialize in that more so. But we don't have the infrastructure. Yeah.
No, it's so true. And honestly, so much of what's happening is because we don't have the infrastructure, right? Like
Mm,
we don't have enough judges in regards to all these asylum cases. We don't have enough, like
yeah.
everything takes it just
So long.
bottlenecks so hard.
Hmm. Yeah.
And people think, oh my gosh, we're being overwhelmed. No, 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 no. It's not that we don't have to be overwhelmed.
Right. Right.
If
Hmm.
the proper systems were put into place and
Yeah.
and people were there to fill them, or if
Hmm.
they were, not that people aren't there, people want to fill them. It's up
Hmm.
to what's up to the federal government to
Right.
fill these judgeships and everything. But right now that's not what they
Happening.
want, right? They'd
Hmm.
rather stoke
Hmm.
fear than saying, oh, you know what, we can make this can work. We if we have more judges, if we
Yeah.
appoint, like if we fill all of these vacancies, all of
Yeah.
that.
It's so hard. I mean, it breaks my heart. I don't know. It breaks my heart for people who've been waiting for months, right? People have been waiting for months and years to like try to resolve their immigration status. And that's the thing. That's the thing. People, okay, my bad. People will say like, "Oh, why don't they do it the right?" This myth of like, do it the right
Doing it
way,
the right way.
doing it the right way, doing it the right way. It's like, yeah, sure, yeah, let's do it the right way. Do you know how expensive that is? Right. Number one, the cost of doing it the right way, the time, right? It doesn't get processed in a month. It takes like sometimes years and years and
And
years to
that's
get
because
processed.
those
The
positions aren't
bottleneck,
filled. The
yeah.
bottleneck.
No, 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 no. It's way more
Nuance.
there's more to it. Yeah, 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 exactly. Like there's more to it than just like, oh, they're just here and they're just not doing it. It's like, no, no, and it's so fascinating to me to track immigration over the years, right? Obviously, right? So the immigration experience that my grandparents experienced versus like people who came in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, it's different because the administrations have been different, the laws have been different, the countries that let's say it plain, the country that you come from also makes it different,
Yeah.
right? Like I think it was ¿cómo se llama? I want to say it was the mayor. I think it's the mayor of Chicago. He had a really powerful video saying like, how interesting that when thousands of Ukrainians came to Chicago, they were basically welcomed with
Yeah.
open arms. But people, migrants from Central America or, from Latin America are not.
Yeah.
Could it be racism? Like, could it be racism? I don't know.
I
Like,
don't know.
who could it be? Like, and that's the thing is like, uh, to me, it's like so
And
obvious,
it's
right?
not
Like
the
it's
people from Ukraine's fault that
no,
that
no, 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 no,
happens,
no. It's
right?
no, no, no. But like,
It's our
yeah,
government, our
exactly.
inherent
No, yeah,
racism that
absolutely,
prevents these things, or that.
absolutely. Like, yeah, like como dicen, like I don't know, like people who are seeking asylum, wherever they're from, it's for a reason, like
Yeah.
I think like it's for a reason. I don't, whatever background you are, if you're seeking asylum, I hope that they can find a place. But it's yeah, it's so yeah, oftentimes like it does break down to race of who is considered, como dicen, who is considered like a good immigrant or like
Yeah.
like that they've assimilated or things like that. It's really tied to
Like what's
race.
happening in Hamas, or not in Hamas because that's an organization.
Yeah.
Happening in Palestine right now?
Oh,
What's happening in Congo? What's happening in
yeah.
various, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of
So much
stuff
happening.
happening
Yeah.
around the world. It's not just
Mm,
that, but obviously that's what's like what the administration right now is looking at the
yeah.
most. But you're right. You don't we these there's African countries that are war torn and people need refuge and people need,
Yeah.
and we're not even, first of all, talking about it, but second of all, doing anything to say, hey, how can we help these people, right? Like our country's not
Yeah.
doing anything. Same
Yeah.
with what's happening to the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
Same what's happening to, and what's happening in Mexico and Central and
Yeah.
South
Yeah.
America. And
Mm,
oftentimes, many of these instances, we have been the United States has been the root
yeah.
cause of the instability that causes all of this. So it's like, why we're
Yep.
like fuck around and find out. Well, we fucked around and now we're trying, you know what I mean? That's like, that's kind of what happens. But
Oh my God. Yeah, 1,000%. So one of the books that I have my students read is by Aviva Chomsky. It's called Central American Forgotten History, I want to say. Um, and she goes through different Central American countries, but what comes out and what the students like pick up on very quickly is like, oh, US involvement, US involvement, US involvement, US involvement in Honduras, US involvement in Nicaragua, right? It's like you kind of destabilize these countries. You kind of overthrew the democratically elected officials, right? For your own
just because they didn't
political
do what we wanted
economic
them to
gain.
do.
Yeah, no, man. Like, it's kind of insane. It's it's kind of insane to think about. Like,
I feel like this is
yeah,
our find out as a country. Like we've fucked
yeah.
around so long,
Yeah.
even though there's so many people who don't agree with that, but just as a country, as a nation, we fucked around so long that this orange Cheeto is our find out. And that sucks. Why did we have to happen now?
I don't know, man. I don't, yeah. No, I kind of I feel the same way. I'm like, all right. I say, okay, I guess the US wants to learn the hard way. All right. That's how I feel. I'm like, okay, want to learn the hard way. That's fine.
Yeah.
But let's buckle up. Let's buckle up because it's gonna be a
Buckle up,
rough.
buttercup.
It's gonna be a rough ride. That is like,
Right.
and that's more so than anything. I just feel for the people who are gonna be como dicen, the collateral damage.
Yeah,
I feel for that's what I feel. That's what I feel. I'm like, there's gonna be damage. There's gonna be people whose like lives are broken up, and like
absolutely.
that's the scary part, and that's the saddest part, as I see it. Like, yeah, I don't know.
No, I
Yeah.
know. Well, I can't believe it. We've like blown through the hour beyond so
Yeah.
quickly. We talked a little bit about all of the things, but if there's something that I didn't, mention what Gold Hoops and God, like the podcast, like what is your
Yeah.
podcast
Mhm.
about?
Yeah. So let's see. I started Gold Hoops and God over the summer, really because I felt this there were so many signs. There were so many so many signs and synchronicities of like you need to be like using your voice, like you do a podcast. Um, so the goal of the podcast is to really feature the diversity of Latina voices, to show that we are not a monolith, right? To show that we are, everything, that we're Salvadorian, Costa Rican, Argentinian, Cuban, right? That we are all these different things, and that each of those are different, and yet that's what's fascinating to me is like we are so different, and yet there is some common bond, right? There's like this really interesting common bond that we're able to find and feel amongst each other. And so we talk about culture, and then we talk about faith. So a lot of my guests, they are either Catholic, Baptist, evangelical, different denominations, and they share their journey, right? Either that they're still involved in religion, have left religion. Some of them, also practice different spiritual forms like Santeria, curanderismo, different things like that. They go to botanicas. And I also wanted to feature that, right? So I wanted to show the diversity of our culture and also the diversity of our like faith and spiritual practices. And then finally, like kind of the last piece that I have my guests share is about their inner niña. So like what would you tell your younger self, or what advice would you give to your younger self? Because I think for a lot of us, there's a lot of like inner healing that we desire to do, or that we kind of need to do. I think sometimes being like the child of immigrants can be very challenging. Like I'm an eldest daughter, and that in and of itself has been like a challenge in its own way. And so I give my guests like an opportunity to talk about that. Yeah, it's been really fun. Yeah, it's a way to kind of do something more in the public sphere, right? So yeah, because aside from my classroom, people don't really get to, yeah, engage with me or like have conversation with me. So
Right.
doing the podcast has been like a super cool way to expand that. So yeah.
Where can people find you online? I know you have your website, drlaurenguerra.com, and we'll make sure to put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And then what is your Instagram? Is it Dr. Laura Guerra?
Yes. So my
Okay.
Instagram, my personal Instagram is Dr. Lauren Guerra, and then the podcast Instagram is goldhoops_God.
I mean, so I always like to give my guests like last, if there's anything we didn't talk about that we didn't touch on, anything else that you want to add, please do so now.
Okay, let's see.
I'm gonna be like Sean from Hot Ones. Here, there's a camera right in front of you. That's all we got. So what else do you want to say?
I think just as a general PSA, I would say be kind to yourself. I think we can be very hard on ourselves. There's so much going on. There's so much going on. And so taking time to be kind to yourself, take care of your mental health. Oh my God, that's like so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be like kind of my message to folks.
Well, Lauren, thank you so much
You're awesome.
for
Thank
joining us and for sharing. I appreciate it.
you.
Mi
Yay.
gente, all of her social, her website will be in the show notes. And until next time.
This was awesome. Thank you, Jessica.
Hola, mi gente. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. If you would like to hear more wine and more chisme, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Saludos.